This is, you guys can now opt out if you're fearful of being recorded. That's why we have this little message on the recording option. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at cutting over interface. I mean, if the interface is not important, this will be an uninteresting exercise. You just change it, you know, it's used one place or something. But we're imagining there's some interface that is used throughout your application. Maybe you have a math library and the CIO just got, you know, flown to Vegas by a company with a new math library and ordered everyone to cut over to that, right? You're on Python 2 and Python organization says Python 2 is going away. You have to cut over to 3. There's no more support for 2. Or you've been using Oracle and it's decided you're going to use MySQL, right? So this is our situation. We have a few possibilities here. In our case, this was an actual cutover I wanted to make. The problem I was solving was the third one. The interface was in the wrong place. What it created was a need for a circular import, which Python is awkward at doing. You can figure it out, but you've got to place the import carefully and so forth. It's not like C++ where you can just have header files and circular imports are easy, right? And the other, we have a bunch of global singletons in the Indra application. And a singleton is an object where we plan that the system only ever will have one of them. So we have an environment for the model and there's only one environment. There's the set of properties we're running with. Thanks to Nathan, we have our nice little propargs module we import. And there's only one set of properties that we have. We have, are you guys seeing the right screen? You're seeing the browser now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Because it's not, the screen is usually highlighted in green, but it's not at the moment. I don't know why. Part of the lovely Zoom interface. So these singletons were all in a module called the registry. And the one singleton that wasn't was the user, because there's one user of the model. And the user is the module that determines, are we running interactively on a terminal? Are we running on a web server? Are we running inside a test suite? Because we want to try to talk to the user differently in those cases. So we can't communicate to the user in the same way if we're on a web server that we can if we're running interactively on a terminal. And again, tests are different. We don't want to ask the test to answer questions for us, right? We need to just accept the defaults. Okay, so I wanted to move this interface and hang on one second. We're getting some. I forgot to actually choose stop recording. All right. We're getting some noise from the background. The straightforward way to do this is build a new interface where you want to tear out the old one, rewrite all the modules, and then test the system, the rewritten system. And we might do 2.1.3 or 1.3.2, but my experience says that all of these are asking for trouble because the size of the batch you're working on is too large. It's too gross a batch size. We want to be able to break this down into much smaller batches of work. And the technique for doing this is similar to the strangler pattern for the people sometimes replace mainframe maps with. We'll discuss that. But rather than this 4-step process, What I'm going to recommend, what we'll do together is build the new interface, test the new interface, rewrite the old interface so that it is a front for the new interface. Test the system with the new old interface in place. So when we hit 4, we haven't touched our application code at all, just the library code that's interfacing to our server. We have an API going to old server. We'll look at this more carefully in a second. We'll stop screen sharing, so this will get bigger. Then once we have the new interface, the old interface being just a front for the new interface, the system is using the new interface. So at this point, let's say we're cutting over from Oracle to MySQL or from Math Library A to Math Library B, we're actually using the new database or the new math library, but we just haven't changed our application at all yet. And now what we can do, now we've done the cutover that prompted us to do this work. Now at our leisure, we can change one module at a time and cut it over so that it directly uses the new interface. The reason we want to do that is having 2 interfaces to the same system is clutter, right? This is a technique for doing the cutover. You don't want both interfaces left around forever. It's puzzling to new programmers, it's extra code. So we change one module, test that module, and this way we have time to thoroughly test the module we just changed. If it's broken, well, we only broke one module and we can put it back, figure out what's wrong. And then we repeat 5 and 6 until all modules are using the new interface, and then we go on and delete the old interface. Let me stop the screen share for a minute and let's diagram this. So how is visibility on the whiteboard? You guys see it okay?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah, I
good.
can read it. It's a little grainy, but I can read it.
Okay. So what we're going to do, so this is the situation we're starting with, right? We've got each of these modules is talking to this, right? So, and this is Oracle, or this is our old math library, and this is MySQL, our new math library. In our case, we're just actually moving. We don't need to even, it's not so much the interface is unsatisfactory, it was just in the wrong place. But often you're gonna have some new features in the interface. Your new math library has some stuff the old one didn't. It's got some options it didn't. But our process is this. First, we disconnect, well, no, I'm sorry. First, let's leave that connected. First, we build an API for the new interface. And this is a general principle that database, math library, any third-party things, you should build something in your in-house that interfaces to it. Because having that interface is going to allow you to do things like this. If we were going straight from our application to directly making calls into the old math library, this process is much harder. What we should do is have a pass-through that we've written that makes calls into the old math library, because then we can do this. This is my new whiteboard eraser here, very elegant. We make these calls into the new API that interfaces with our new service.
Professor, sorry to interrupt. Can you bring
And
this?
Yes.
Can you bring the whiteboard a little more towards your left? Because I'm not able to see the
This
edges.
way.
Yeah. Now I can see it.
Right. Okay, great. So what happens at this point when we've made this app is no longer connected to this. So if we were paying a license for the old library, we can stop paying that license. We're using the new library, right? It's just we're using it through the old interface. So there may be some translation here. There may be some features of this new service we're not using yet. Maybe the new math library has some fancy matrix algebra that we're not taking advantage of yet. But now we're using it, we can start putting that in here, and our application can directly use that. And now what we do is we begin disconnecting these modules of our application. I actually have paper towels. I have to get a real whiteboard eraser, but I don't have one now. So we begin disconnecting one module at a time and connect them to the new API. And now they can take advantage of the new features and so forth. And we reconnect each of them, and then we can delete the old API. So let's actually go and do that. And I had begun doing this before I decided to share this with people. So, excuse me, there may be a bit of code still hanging around from my start at doing this, in which case I think we'll just take advantage of the fact that some of it's already there. Okay, so here's our old interface. We have a bunch of calls to this singleton object, the user. And this is the way we're getting debug messages to the user, telling the user something's happening in the application, logging stuff. And we have some special message types that just call these other ones. So this is the interface we want to move. And what do we have? We want to have not implemented should come down here.
Hey, Gene, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. So I thought I had, thank you. You know, I got one step through sharing the screen, but didn't click the final button to say, go ahead and share it. Okay, so here we are in user, and this is the set of things down through run notice, down through not implemented. There's this set of about 7 or 8 calls. So that's up to line 61. So we want to take 26 to 61, and we're just going to yank them into a buffer and go to our other file. And we're just going to paste them in. Okay, so essentially we've created the interface in the new place, and we're going to change this and say we're going to start with the user, not the env. And we have it with an underscore here to signal that people should not be directly calling it. So we need to change it between lines 15 and 28. So we have a call that we use to set the environment, and we're going to duplicate that for setting the user. So we have set user, and we better change this to user and user and user and user. Okay, so now we have the ability to set it. Now let's go back to where the interface was, and we're going to do, when we create our singletons, we have a call to set it. So whenever the object of the user class is created, we set the global singleton. So this way we guarantee that creating a user sets the singleton because it's in the constructor. Someone may try to create a couple users, but only the last one will actually be registered as the user. So we haven't enforced this as a singleton. And this is the cutover, so that's good. So we need to import set user, right? And we're gonna have a couple other, actually we're going to just import the registry. And now what we're going to do is take the current interface and cut it over. So this will have to be so user tell inside the user module now is a call to user tell inside the registry. User debug is now such a call. User log. User, whoops, that went a little too far, didn't it? Reg dot. We want to call user log error. And what we can do now, these strings that we're adding in, error and so forth, they're in the other module now. So we don't need them here anymore. These are just convenience functions. They make the logging messages uniform so that every error has error colon, every warning has warning colon. By doing that in one place, we prevent people from spelling error with a capital E one place and lower another and so forth. So we can have a uniform string to look at. And this we want. Okay, and this is going to be reg dot. Okay, so what we've done is we've now made the interface to the user logging and notification system in user a pass-through to the system that exists in the registry. All right. So let's look at, I had begun cutting over agent. And we actually have the calls here. So let's see if we're using them at all. Log notif. So what we have are prints. In the meantime, so this is actually an error, huh? Okay, so user log error, print, user log error. So here, this is the place we could not use the old interface because we generated a circular import. So this was the actual impetus for moving this. We can, let's just change a single case of this. We're not going to change everything because changing this one section will be enough for us to run a test. And now we can go ahead and run our tests of the system here and see if we've made any errors. Yeah, something, we don't have a comma there. Is that what I did? Yeah. Forgot to put a comma in, huh? But we've not touched any application code yet. We've just made some library changes, and we're already able to begin testing and finding problems in what we've done. Okay, stir has no registry.py. Yes. So we forgot to change this one, huh? All right. We'll run our tests again. All right. Agent is not using user log notif yet. Should we put in a call to that? Let's do it. So we need that call anyway, user log notif, and at least we can quiet Flake 8 so it stops complaining. And I predict success this time. Okay, we passed all our tests there. So we're now at the step where all of our application is now using the interface in registry. There's also an improvement we can make. There is a problem with the way this was built, and what we're going to want to do is this is something we could do with a decorator, but I'm just going to quickly do this now. If the user is none, print message, and else. So this makes our system a little more robust, because what would happen before, if someone tried to call this, we only need this in 3 places, and we just indent here. If they tried to call this before the user was set, it would crash. So it would crash, and then we'd say, oh, you have to wait till the user is set to call it. But printing the message may not be exactly what we want, but almost certainly printing it is better than crashing, should the user not be set. Now, there is a trade-off. If some reason an application is not setting the user ever, then we won't detect it because it won't crash and it'll keep printing. But this should be set automatically in the library, so it shouldn't really be a problem. The applications, the models that we're using are not setting these themselves. So therefore, they should be A-OK. And what we're going to do is now go on to the step 5 and 6 part. So we've gotten through step 4. We're actually using the new interface, and now we're going to change a module, maybe change 2 of them right now. We don't need to go through every module in the system. Once we do this for 1 or 2, it'll be obvious how we keep going, right? Basic, oh no, we want to be in the models directory. So we're importing user tell and run notice. So all we need to do is import the exact same things from the registry. So let's just show that the basic module is working now, even though we change where it's working, right? Okay, and we're getting, we have, up here we have some calls to user log notification, right? Some interesting bug here. but has nothing to do with what we're doing. We just got a notification about it. So that's a separate issue. In any case, the model runs okay. It has no problems relating to our log cutover. So now we can go ahead and switch where the user interface, the application interface is going to be called. And we just cut it over to call the one in the registry. We run again. And it's all A-OK. We'll cut over one more. We'll cut over bacteria. So bacteria is using the same two calls. So we'll just move them up. I'm just moving it so that all the imports from registry are next to each other. It's not necessary, but it's tidier that way. So now we've cut it over. We're using the new API, and we will try running bacteria and see what happens. I'm curious about that message that we couldn't add. We have a similar message here. So that's an interesting bug, but it has nothing to do with our logging system. It's something to do with adding members to a group. So that's something we'll have to explore, but it's not a bug in what we're doing right now. So for our purposes, we can set that aside as a different bug, and notice the model runs just fine. So we have been able to, in a few minutes, because this was a simple change, right? The interface was small, and the new interface was just a copy of the old one in a new place. So sometimes the new interface could be significantly different. Sometimes in writing the connection between the old API and the new one, you'll need to do some translation because the parameters are in a different order, or you're gonna have to fill in some defaults that this interface didn't have, but this one does. You might have to, there's various translations that can go on in here. We had a particularly simple case, which for purposes of this demonstration is good because it made the cutover fast. It made it simple to see what was going on. So we made the old API just point to the new API. And at that point, everyone's using the new service. And the old service can go away. Then we did this cutover with two of our modules and made them directly use the new API. But we can now do that, whenever we have some downtime and, you've got a half hour and you don't have any other work to do. You go, oh, you know what, I'll cut over module 1 to the new API. And that can be done, in a much more leisurely fashion. And because you're doing one module at a time, you're able to focus on that and test it. If this interface had involved different parameters and so forth, that testing step could be much trickier, right? You're much more likely to have actually broken things. Well, now we can go calmly, one at a time through our modules, cut them over when we're not in the middle of a release or something, and have time to focus on just the module we're cutting over, make sure it works. Good, got module 1 done. It's now pointing to the new API. And when we get a chance, we'll go on to module 2 and cut it over. By breaking this up into smaller batches, we get a much more orderly process with many more chances to step in with tests, many more places where we can detect if there's some problem in our cutover process. And my experience is that although we've gone from 4 steps to 8 distinct steps, but 5 and 6 are repeated. So you may wind up with 20, 30 steps. In fact, it's faster. Because my experience with the direct method is you wind up, if it's a big interface used in a lot of places, we could imagine Ubisoft, which has 15 million, 25 million lines of C++, I believe, in Assassin's Creed, cutting over to a new math library, and how many places they're going to have to change code. Trying to do that all at once is going to result in just a tremendous amount of debugging, whereas doing it a step at a time really cuts down the amount of problems you're going to hit. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Syed,
Yes.
did you have a question? You popped up. So when I see somebody pop up on screen, that I think that means they're trying to speak. So maybe you just, sometimes you find it, you guys see that moth come by? Just did a fly through of the video. Luckily, I don't think we're going to get any bears up here during the video. But I've been meeting bears in the yard, Nathan, with every few weeks. I run into one. Did you have a question, Syed?
No.
Okay, Nathan, you wanted to.
I'm trying to think about testing, so that there would be a test suite for the old API and the new API.
Yeah, we should have. If we should have written unit tests for the new API, but since this wasn't a talk on unit testing, I didn't want to take the time to go write the unit test. But we did test it when we ran through the agent unit tests.
Right.
But yes, when we write the new API, we should write unit tests for that. Absolutely right. Since you're holding a whiteboard marker, if in fact you want to write anything on the whiteboard, feel free to. Yeah. All right.
I think it's a bad I think it's a bad marker. It's not doing anything.
You have the cap on, Nathan. Of course it doesn't write. All right.
Silly me.
Any other questions? Yeah. All right. I think we will